I'd like to welcome you to a virtual tour of the University of Kentucky's Horticulture Research Farm, specifically the Organic Farming Unit. My name is Kristi Durbin, and I am the manager of our Community Supported Agriculture, or CSA, program out here at this farm. So this farm is a historic farm, and back in the day was active with hemp and horses. And in the 1950s, the University of Kentucky took it over. And when you enter in on the main road, which is Emmert Farm Lane, it's actually named after one of the professors in the 1950s, Dr. Emory Emmert. He is known as kind of the father of plasticulture. Plasticulture, what does that mean? That basically means the use of plastic in agricultural production. And so we do use plastic in many ways on our farm, and you'll get to learn about some of those ways through this video today. So Dr. Emory Emmert was a pioneer for the use of plastic in agriculture, and this is now a major global contribution to agriculture, as plastic is now used extensively throughout the world. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the farm itself. The farm is around 100 acres now, and on this farm, we do a lot of extension, research, and education activities, part of the whole land grant mission of the university. So some of the production out here at this farm for extension and research includes nursery crops, hemp, vineyards, viticulture, and enology, or winemaking, as well as ornamentals and vegetable production. On the south side of our farm is 35 acres that are USDA certified organic. And on this section, known as the Organic Farming Unit, is where we do organic focused research, extension, and outreach with growers. And it is on that organic unit that I manage our community supported agriculture program on 10 of those acres. So over the course of the next few moments, we're gonna take a virtual tour of this farm. You're gonna get to see more of the Organic Farming Unit, learn about our CSA and our membership, learn about our education activities through the Sustainable Agriculture Program and our apprenticeship, and then really get a glimpse into farm life, what it takes to grow crops, how we grow crops, how we process them, and then hand them out to members. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the UK CSA program. So the UK CSA program was started in around 2007 by Dr. Mark Williams. And really, there was a lot of farmers at that time who were trying to get out of tobacco and transition to something different. And so what we basically created was looking at alternatives to tobacco production, and diversified vegetables became one of those options. And so CSA really is just a marketing strategy to do direct to consumer sales. So what is CSA? What does it look like? Well, CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. It is a relationship between a farm and a customer. So in our case, we sell our products mostly to the UK community. So members will buy in and give us the money kind of upfront. So there's a benefit there for the farmer. They're getting the money in advance of their growing season. This helps to offset costs like labor, seeds, and other inputs. And then in return for that membership fee that they pay, our members receive a share of our produce that we produce on the farm. So for our season, it runs 22 weeks from May through October. And each week, members will receive between 6 and 10 different vegetables, fruits, and herbs. And so there'll be varying quantities of those vegetables depending on what's in season. There's also a risk that's involved for the customer. If we have a particularly bad season in terms of weather, a drought, or an insect infestation, there is a risk for the CSA member to know that we may not be able to have the same types of items every single year in the same quantities that they'd want. But there are a lot of benefits for the members as well. So what do the members get for joining a CSA? They get to know their farmer, they get to know us, know how we're producing the food, and they form a relationship with us. They have an opportunity to come to our farm for U-Pick and other fun events like potlucks. So you really form a relationship, and that really builds into what it means to be a community. In addition, they get access to a diverse array of vegetables. We grow over 40 different types of crops, which represent over 200 different varieties. So the abundance and the diversity is a real key feature of what a CSA is about as well. And their food is fresh, produced locally. And in our case, we deliver our produce in 2 different locations. So one location is on the farm itself. Members can come here to pick up their vegetables. The other option is they can come to campus. We set up in the orange parking lot across from Kroger Field. And so that means that their food is only traveling at most 0.4 miles from farm to fork. So that's pretty amazing. So cutting down on the energy costs that way is a key perk, I guess, of joining the CSA. Knowing your food, knowing your farmer, and having that relationship. In addition, we provide our members with a lot of resources. So what do you do with this particular crop? How do I cook with this food? We provide a newsletter. We give them tips about how to cook, how to store, recipes, a meal plan for the week. We try to help our members really enjoy the bounty that we're producing at the farm. So there is a challenge there for members to learn how to cook all these vegetables. 40 different vegetables is a lot. And if you're getting 6 to 10 different vegetables every week, that's probably more than a lot of people are used to in America. So there is a challenge there, a learning curve, you could say, figuring out how to cook the vegetables, how to prepare them, and really enjoy them. And that's part of the fun too. It's sort of a food adventure, we like to say, for our members. So that's a little bit about what the CSA is all about. And our CSA is open to students, staff, faculty, and friends of the program. The cost is $650 for 22 weeks. And we're just really excited that we can offer this to our community. Also, I'll mention that in the UK CSA, we have over 200 members that participate. So what does that mean? That means each member might be 1 or 2 households. In some cases, members will split a share because it is a lot of vegetables and share that with a colleague or a coworker or a friend. So really, we're probably feeding close to around 1,000 people off of our farm. And that's pretty awesome. In addition, one of the challenges for the farmer is knowing how to grow so many different types of vegetables. And another challenge is really marketing. So every single year, we have to find their members to be part of our CSA. A lot of our members return, but really it's only around 60 to 65% that return every year. So our retention rate is around the same as the national average for a CSA. So that means that every year we're looking for between 35 and 40% of our membership to be brand new people who've maybe never done it or haven't done it recently, and recruiting them to join. So that is a challenge for the farmer. But once they find their market, then they have a guaranteed market. And that means that they don't have to worry about the money that's going to come in later. They've already received the money up front, and it really helps the farmer on planning and logistics for their share. Also, one last fun fact is over the course of our 22-week season, members will receive over 400 pounds of produce. So that is quite a lot of food, and it is really a great value at the end of the day. So when the CSA was started in 2007, it was really an integral part of the University of Kentucky's Sustainable Agriculture undergraduate major. And so as a key part of that, we offer an apprenticeship program, which is really kind of the keystone of what our farm is all about, what the CSA is all about. And so having students participate in this apprenticeship, which is SAG 397, they get to come out here and take weekly classes. The class topics will cover everything that students want to know about farming. Anything from starting a plant in the greenhouse to getting that plant in the field, how to prep your soil and get that ready. Talk about fertility, disease management, insect management, also thinking about beekeeping and the need for pollinators. And then we also look at organic certification, food safety, and business planning for a small farm. So there's a lot that goes into the classes. And then in addition to the class time, the students who participate will also spend 100 hours in the field with our crew. And in that way, they get to see what it really takes to work in the field, in the hot, in the rain, in the sun, and have that experience of growing, cultivating, harvesting the vegetables, and then processing them as well and handing them out to members. So it's really a wonderful class. It's a 3-credit course offered in the summertime. It's open to any major and is a requirement if you are a sustainable agriculture major or minor. Part of that apprenticeship also involves getting to cook with the food and eat the food that you're growing out here. One of the components of the class is getting to cook a meal using our vegetables for community lunch. And that's always a highlight of a way to get to know how to cook the food that you're growing. And then you can take that information and share it with the members. So our students get to meet our members at the pickup locations, talk to them, and give them exchange the ideas about, hey, this is how we cook this vegetable at lunch today, and share some ideas that way. So it's a really wonderful experience, really community building, and it's a great segue into figuring out what it might look like to be more involved in the local food system. So we're standing in a greenhouse out at our farm. This is a place where a lot of our plants that end up in the field get a head start. So we seed into trays, they start growing, and they'll be in here for anywhere between 3 and maybe 12 weeks. And then once they're big enough and strong enough and have a good enough root system, then we can plant them in the ground. So at UKCSA, we grow our vegetables on around 10 acres. What you can see behind me and around me represents 6 to 7 of those acres. Each of our fields is laid out in the same way. So they're 50 feet wide by 300 feet long, which is roughly a third of an acre. So this makes it really easy for us to figure out how much we need to grow of something and do our calculations. So behind me, we have one of our fields that's been overwintering, which is our garlic field. So we'll take a look at that garlic field and talk a little bit about our specific production system. So in this field, we've been growing garlic. The garlic is planted in October and overwinters. We won't harvest it until June, and then it'll have to cure in our greenhouse for 3 to 4 weeks. And then our members will start receiving it in July. So it's a very long crop and it's in the ground a long time. So you notice that it's been planted on this black plastic. So why do we use the black plastic? There's a couple reasons. One is it attracts the warmth from the sun, and so it warms up the soil. So that gives us some temperature benefits. In addition, it shades out any weeds that might want to grow there. So the only place you might see weeds is in the holes where the plants are coming out or next to the beds. In addition, it helps conserve moisture. So it prevents evaporation. And one of the ways we also help with the moisture is through our drip irrigation system. So this is a drip irrigation line. It has small slits on the top here of this tube. And so when the water is pumping in from the front here, it goes all the way down this bed and it's under the soil. It's actually buried about 3 to 4 inches under the soil. So why is that important? Well, we're putting the water right in the root zone of the plant. That means that the water is going to uptake most of that. The plant's going to uptake most of that water. In this way, the water conservation is really key and critical here as part of our sustainability efforts. The plant is going to use 95 to 99% of this water, which is way more efficient water use than, say, a sprinkler system or a flood furrow system. So what are the trade-offs of the black plastic? I just talked a little bit about the benefits, but there's also trade-offs. So one of them is it's a petroleum product. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that it is a single-use product and it's going to end up in the landfill at the end of the season. So that's unfortunate. But the benefits it's going to give us, so we can reduce the amount of times we have to cultivate this ground with a tractor for weeds, is also really substantial. And so the trade-offs for us outweigh the negatives of it being a disposable product. One of the other ways that we're trying to think about soil health on our farm, in addition of minimizing the impact of tractors, is also thinking about adding more green material into the soil. So by adding more organic matter, that organic matter can really help alleviate compaction, increases air and water flow and water penetration through the soil profile. So that's really important for soil health and also for plant health. And so one way is that we're trying to add that organic matter into our system is by growing what we call a living mulch. So this plastic is what we call a plastic mulch. It's mulching, just like you have mulch at your house. You lay out wood chips, you're trying to shade out weeds. That's what this is doing. It's a plastic mulch. But we're also using a mulch that's living. It's actually an intentional crop that we've planted. In this case, we've planted annual rye and clover. So this clover and rye has been in the ground since the fall. It's covered the soil. So what is that doing? Well, it's reducing erosion potential from wind and water over the winter season. And then we can also mow this and incorporate it back into the soil once we're done with this field and adding all that organic matter back into the ground. So there's a lot of benefits that living mulches can do for us. In addition, the clover is a particular type of crop that's giving an additional benefit. It's a legume. So that means that it is actually fixating nitrogen from the atmosphere and putting it back into the soil for us. So it's actually giving a little bit of a fertility boost to our soil, so the soil doesn't get so depleted from nutrients by the garlic itself. So that's a little bit about our system here. One of our other growing systems is a bare ground system. So we only use plastic when it really matters. So for example, the garlic, it's in the ground a really long time. That's why we would use the plastic, because we don't want to have to cultivate and weed many, many times over the course of the 7 or 8 months that it's in the ground. A bare ground system, however, is great for crops that are a little faster growing, that don't really have to have too much competition with weeds. Things like greens, lettuce, beets, things like that. So 2 different systems out here, depending on the crop, depending on the benefits that we need from the soil warmth perspective or the weed control perspective. So I'm standing right now outside of our packing shed building. So this is where I like to say the magic happens. Basically, we're gonna bring the crops in once we harvest them out of the field to this building. And in this building, we're gonna wash them, we're gonna count them, we're gonna sort them, pack them, and then store them. So there's different ways in which we can wash different crops. Behind me is our bunched washing station that's outside. On this table, we have a hands-free area where we can wash bunched items like bunches of beets, bunches of carrots, green onions, turnips, things like that. And then inside, we'll take a look at some of our other pieces of equipment. The first I'll talk about is our bin washer. Our bin washer is really a wonderful piece of equipment because you can do high pressure sprays to clean and sanitize bins. We also can use it on crops. So we can also use that on crops like beets and turnips and carrots and other things. The second piece of equipment I'll talk about inside the shed is the barrel washer. So the barrel washer, it looks like a barrel and it spins on like a barrel. The water sprays the crops that are inside, and as they clean, they slowly exit the barrel on the other end. So this piece of equipment is great for root crops, things that don't have greens on them. So loose carrots, loose radishes, loose beets, loose turnips. The brush washer is the next piece of equipment. And this one is great for crops like peppers, eggplant, and squashes. It uses these rotating brushes to clean and get the dirt off of the crops. But a lot of our crops, however, are greens, things like lettuce, spinach, kale, and other crops like broccoli as well actually get dunked and submerged in a tank. So we use what we call our dunk tank to wash those items. Inside the dunk tank is a bubbler. The bubbler injects air into the water, which just helps to loosen the soil that might be on those crops and wash it off. Any of the loose greens like lettuce and spinach have to then be spun in an industrial salad spinner. You might have a version of this in your home, but this is an industrial scale one. So we fill it up, spin it, and it helps to get the water off of those leaves. So after the crops are washed, we're gonna pack them into bins, count them, weigh them, and store them in our cooler. Ideally, we would have 4 different storage environments based on the crops. Each crop has its own requirement for its threshold for freezing, cooling, and that sort of thing. So in our system, we currently have 2 coolers, and we're in the process of building 2 more so that we can have an array of different storage environments that are keyed in for each crop. So when we're washing produce, we also use a food-safe sanitizer within the wash water. Why do we do this? It's part of our food safety plan to ensure that there aren't any pathogens on the crops from between harvest and storage. So in our case, we're using a product called Sanidate. And this is an organic approved product that we put in a dilute ratio into the wash water to sanitize all of our produce. In addition to following food safe practices, we have been GAP certified. So GAP, G-A-P, stands for Good Agricultural Practices. And this is basically requirements based on who you're selling your product to. It's frequently dictated by your buyer. So for example, if you're selling your product to a market or a grocery store, they may ask if you are GAP certified. So we were GAP certified from the USDA, and this allowed us to sell products to UK Dining. And so what they do as part of your GAP certification is you have to develop a food safety plan that shows that you are doing everything you can to be food safe, and both from harvest to storage and delivery. It's really a third-party inspection of your system that is unique to food safety. It's kind of similar to the organic inspection. So when we have an organic inspection, we have a third party come to our farm. In this case, it's KDA, the Kentucky Department of Ag. And they come and inspect our farm to make sure that we're following organic practices. So this is an opportunity for them to inspect us and verify that we've been keeping the right records, using the right inputs, and keeping and upholding the organic standards. So this is definitely a unique situation for organic farms. No other farmers really have to undergo any kind of inspection like this unless they want to be certified organic or certified third-party GAP audited. I'm standing in front of a structure that we call a high tunnel. Behind me, this structure is covered in plastic. It's just one of the many uses of plastic in agriculture on our farm. So what is that plastic doing for us? Well, for one, it's trapping warmth. It gathers in the sunlight and holds it inside. So that warms the structure, the interior of the structure up more than what the outside temperature is. So why is this valuable? Well, it offers the farmers an opportunity to have season extension. So that means they can have an earlier season in the spring and they can have a later season into the fall. And this is valuable for the farmer because they can actually get a premium for their product at market by having that crop there before a lot of their other competitors, as well as having crops longer in the fall before winter sets in. So it's offering a good market opportunity for the farmer. And in our system, we use it for season extension so we can have spring sales at our farm stand as well as a longer season in the fall. But one of the other benefits of the plastic on this structure is that it excludes rainfall. In Kentucky, we get a lot of rain. And why is rain a problem? Well, for one, rain can spread disease. So if the plants have a disease on them, that rainfall can splash it and move it around. And so we try to minimize that with things like this so that we can actually have less problems in the field. So it's a great opportunity for farmers to get more value out of their crops and to extend their season. So the structure behind me is called a hay grove. So a hay grove is quite similar to a high tunnel, but you'll notice that it doesn't have side walls or end walls. It only has a roof. So there's plastic on the roof that serves a similar function to what a high tunnel does with plastic, primarily excluding rainfall and adding a little bit of extra warmth. So we would use this structure primarily for high-value crops like tomatoes, and behind me we have brambles, also known as a type of fruit. These are both blackberries and raspberries that get grouped together under the term brambles. So we grow these fruits under here because they don't do well when they get really pounded with a lot of rainfall, which we do have a lot of in Kentucky. So the structure we're standing in right now is called a solar greenhouse. So this structure is heated passively by the sun. The sun during the day is heating up this north wall. On one half, we have a wall that is sand, filled with sand. And the other half is actually barrels that are filled with water. So on different sides, you're gonna see different effects. On one side, the sun is gonna heat up that sand, and that sand is gonna radiate the heat back to these crops to buffer low nighttime temperatures. The water barrels do the same thing. That water heats up through the sun and then radiates that heat back into the house during the nighttime. So you can actually see a very wide range of temperatures throughout the day based on the sunlight conditions and how hot it is outside. For example, in the middle of winter, I've seen this structure covered in ice and snow, but because the sun was shining, it actually got up to about 106 degrees in here. So one of the key things about this structure is you have to vent it properly, which means opening the walls, opening the doors, and getting more airflow in here. But this is a great structure to use the sun to your benefit for your crops and allows you to grow crops in the middle of winter. One of the crops that we grow down here is ginger and turmeric. Ginger and turmeric are tropical plants from Hawaii, and they do really well in this really warm environment. So at UKCSA, I mentioned that we cultivate over 10 acres of land for our members. So at that scale, we have to be highly mechanized in order to be efficient. So we do use a lot of equipment on tractors in order to get the job done well and quickly. So for example, I talked about two different growing systems, a plastic system like the garlic, where the crop is planted on a plastic mulch, and a bare ground system where there would not be plastic in the ground. So for each of those systems, we will plant the plants or what we might call a transplant. A transplant is just a plant that kind of has gotten a head start in the greenhouse. So we'll take that transplant and get it in the ground using a piece of equipment. And this is an example of one of those pieces of equipment. This is our mechanical transplanter. It's used in our bare ground system. So the way it works is you have two folks that ride on the back of this piece of equipment. They have trays that slide in here vertically on these carousels. And then the student or the worker can turn this, pull the little plants out, and stick them in these little chutes that will then drop the plant into the ground. It shoots a little bit of water and fertilizer at the same time. So we're fertilizing, we're watering, and we're planting all in one pass with this piece of equipment. So some of the other pieces of equipment we use on tractors is for cultivation. So what do I mean by cultivation? Cultivation is basically caring for the crop. And in our case, the way we care for it is by eliminating the weeds, the plants that are going to try to compete for the water and the nutrients. So we try to get rid of weeds through cultivation passes. So this is an example of one of those cultivation pieces of equipment. This is called a finger weeder. The reason it's called a finger weeder is because of these flexible finger-like tines right down here. You can see I can bend them. So they flex and this will spin. So as you drive it along, they're going to spin and actually overlap like this and fling weeds out of the way of the plant. But the plant's going to be big enough that it can withstand this sort of intense movement. So this is one of the main pieces of a cultivation equipment we use for weed control, and it's highly effective. So at UKCSA, in our mechanized system, we have to use an implement to prepare the soil, and that's called tillage. So our first pass in our field is primary tillage, and we're going to use this piece of equipment right here. This is called a spader. A spader simply lifts the soil rather than inverting it. It just lifts it up, sets it back down, and kind of messes with the top a little bit to make it a smooth surface. So it's actually way easier on the soil, better for soil health, preserving the soil structure than some other pieces of equipment. After we spade, we have to get ready to plant the actual plants. But before we can do that, we have to use this piece of equipment. This is called a stale seed bed implement. So stale seed bed, let's break that down. Basically, you're gonna have a bed of soil, it's bare ground system, and you're gonna wanna put a plant in there. But before you do, you wanna make sure there aren't a lot of weeds there that are already gonna get a head start on that crop. So by running this piece of equipment through there, it's gonna get rid of all the weeds. It's gonna chop weeds, it's gonna bury weeds, it'll squash weeds, it's gonna try to kill weeds as many ways that it can possibly do. In addition, there's a roller on the back, and what the roller does is it packs down the soil. So what that is doing is giving you a flat, level surface that you can now plant into. So this is the next step after spading to prepare your soil for putting a plant in the ground. So I've talked a lot about various ways we are mechanized at UKCSA, from preparing our soil to putting a plant in the ground and to weeding and cultivating that crop. So here's another question, a quiz, say. How many of those 40 crops that we grow out here do you think we use a piece of equipment to harvest? So out of 40, how many of those crops might we use a tractor and an implement to harvest? Well, I'll tell you what, it's one, just one. And I'm standing by the piece of equipment that harvests that crop, and that's green beans. So what this piece of equipment does is it picks the beans off the plant, sends them up a conveyor, and then they drop down in the chute right into the bin. And that's it. That's all you gotta do. There's no more harvest that's involved. All the other crops, we might use a piece of equipment to help us harvest, but ultimately the picking, the pulling, the bagging, the bunching, that's gonna happen by us, the labor. So all the other crops relies on a lot of labor to get it done. So when you're talking about a diversified vegetable system, it may not make sense to have a ton of equipment for a ton of different crops. We have to have one piece of equipment for one crop. So can you imagine what it would take to have specialized equipment for 40 crops? It just isn't practical on our scale. So that's why we rely on a lot of labor. And this is really a limiting factor in our production system. If you go to our economic analysis online that I mentioned earlier, you'll see that labor accounts for over 50% of our expenses. So it is a huge deal for organic vegetable growers. So at our farm, we do take sustainability seriously. So what is sustainability? So just to recap, sustainability really is about three things: the planet, people, and profit. So you think about it being economically viable operation, you want to have a CSA that is economically viable. And we have done that analysis on our farm. In fact, this is a document you can now find online. It's the economic analysis of our organic farming unit. If you Google that, UK CSA economic analysis, you can pull that document up and get information about how our farm is viable and can produce or net over $5,000 per acre. In addition, we think about the planet. So how can we actually reduce our carbon footprint? So part of that is the use of solar panels. So we had a solar panel array installed with a grant from the Sustainability Council, and that solar panel array now powers all of our energy needs on the organic farming unit. Coolers, lights, buildings, you name it, it powers it. In fact, we actually have an excess of energy that's going back into the grid through that solar panel. In addition, we can actually power some of our bicycles. We've had bicycles out here that are solar powered with battery powered. So those battery powered bikes are charged by the solar panel. We also use bikes just to reduce our carbon footprint. Using the trucks and the other vehicles on this farm less means that we're less reliant on the petroleum products. So that's a win for us as well. And so we're really proud that we can continue to use bikes and can try to grow green as much as possible. We've also used the bikes in the field to harvest, bring product in and out, to bring supplies and materials around the farm. So it's just a really fun way for us as staff and students to get around the farm using pedal power. In addition, the last part of sustainability is thinking about people, giving back to the community and having that social responsibility to care for your community. The CSA is a great model to really invest in your community by providing nutritious food to the people that you are in your neighborhood. And so we do that, but we also think about giving back. So one way we do that is offering a discount for students on the CSA share itself. Students receive about a 10% discount to make it more feasible for them to fund. In addition, we donate excess produce. So when we do have excess produce, we partner with an organization called Glean KY, Glean Kentucky. And this is basically a food redistribution network. So they collect excess produce from farms and food markets, and then they redistribute it to food banks and other agencies in the area that can use it to help people in need. I hope you've enjoyed the time you've spent together looking at the UK Horticulture Research Farm, learning more about our organic farming unit, as well as our community-supported agriculture program and our sustainable agriculture education programs. If you have any questions about the apprenticeship or the CSA, don't hesitate to reach out and get in touch. You can reach me by email at uk.csa@uky.edu. In addition, I invite you to check out our blog, where we have newsletters for our members, as well as an extensive recipe archive with lots of ideas for how you might cook, store, and preserve vegetables we grow at this farm. The blog address is ukcsa.wordpress.com. Lastly, you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, as well as Instagram at UKCSA. So follow us, check us out, and keep up to date with all of our fun farm happenings. We hope you have a great time and come see us soon.